The International Court of Justice issued new provisional measures that order Israel to immediately end military operations in Rafah. But will the ICC warrants for Israel and Hamas leaders ever be enacted? Let's unpack this further with Professor Hennie Strydom, an international relations expert, of the University of Johannesburg. Prof, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this evening. Perhaps maybe let's just begin with an overview, Prof, of the ICC's role in holding individuals accountable for war crimes, crimes against humanity, as well as genocide.
Yeah, good evening to you and to the listeners. The ICC has a sort of criminal jurisdiction, and its main function is to investigate cases against individuals being responsible for gross violations of international law. And that is why we have seen the current development in the ICC to apply for the issuing of warrants against senior leaders within the Israeli government and within Hamas. And that takes place under the Rome Statute, which is the founding document of the ICC. And it must be distinguished from the role played by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, which coincidentally today issued new interim measures against Israel, quite significantly stating quite emphatically that Israel should halt its military offensive in Rafah. Now, why the ICJ referred to the offensive operations is quite significant. It allows Israel still to defend itself against specific attacks from Hamas, if that would be the case. But beyond that, that was the role of the ICJ today, was to say to Israel, you should stop your military offensive beyond self-defense in Rafah. And that sort of may be relevant for the ICC as well, the International Criminal Court, who is investigating the criminal responsibility of individuals responsible for violations of international humanitarian law and possibly for violations under the Genocide Convention.
And in that investigation, Prof, what factors influence the decision-making process of the ICC when considering issuing warrants for political leaders accused of such crimes?
Yeah, I think people or listeners should have taken note of the fact, and viewers, that the chief prosecutor now has submitted an application to one of the chambers of the ICC for the issuing of warrants of arrest. So that is the first step to be taken by the chief prosecutor, and that is to put before a chamber of the court evidence to the effect that there's a reasonable case to be made out against certain individuals. And on the basis of that, the chief prosecutor is applying for warrants of arrest to be issued by the court. And I think we can rest assured that the chief prosecutor will make sure that he has sufficient evidence to justify his application. Otherwise, it serves no purpose to bring a case to court without the necessary evidence. And this is an important sort of phase because it gives the sort of indication to a specific chamber of the court, of the International Criminal Court, that investigations have taken place, evidence has been gathered, and that evidence indicates that certain individuals on both sides have committed or potentially may have committed certain offenses. And for that reason, there is an application for a warrant of arrest.
And how do you think geopolitical considerations and power dynamics impact the ICC's ability to pursue these cases against individuals from different countries and different regions?
Yeah, what we have to understand is once the say, for instance, that the court will now decide there is sufficient evidence, a reasonable case has been made out for the issuing of warrants of arrest. Then the responsibility to arrest those subject to the warrants of arrest, the responsibility to arrest them and surrender them to court will now shift to the members of the court. All the states parties that have signed up to the Rome Statute have that obligation. So the court doesn't have a sort of police force to go and arrest persons. It doesn't have the authority and it doesn't have the powers to do so. The court depends solely on its members to fulfill that function. Let me sort of remind you of two, and the viewers also, to two incidents that also involved South Africa. The one was the al-Bashir case, where al-Bashir visited South Africa under a warrant of arrest for crimes against humanity, war crimes, and genocide. And there was a huge sort of hoo-ha about South Africa's responsibility, and eventually al-Bashir escaped and went back after his visit in 2015 to an African Union summit. And the same happened in the case of Vladimir Putin, when there was a chance that he would, attend the BRICS summit in South Africa very recently, a year or so ago. And that illustrates the responsibility of individual states who are members of the court to make the arrests and to surrender those sought by the court to the ICC to stand trial. And that is where we are at this moment, provided, of course, that the ICC decides to grant the application by the chief prosecutor for the warrants of arrest.
And in reference to these past incidences, are there others that we could make reference of in terms of where successful arrests have actually been made?
Yes, al-Bashir is one example. He went back to his country after his visit to South Africa, and unfortunately for him, there was a change of regime in his country, and they decided, the new government decided to arrest him and surrender him to the court. So that's one possibility. The other possibility is where a person who is subject to a warrant of arrest travels to a country who is prepared to arrest that person and then surrender him to the court. So those are the options that we have in cases where it might be otherwise very difficult to arrest a person and surrender to the court. The other situation is, of course, Vladimir Putin. If he doesn't travel to a country who is sort of in a position and willing and able to arrest him and surrender him to the court, he will never appear before the court. The only other option is if there is a change of regime in his own country, and that new government decides to surrender him, arrest and surrender him to the court, which is unlikely to happen given the political situation in Russia and the type of government they have. So currently, we have the same problems with regard to the leadership in Israel, and I think we have possibly the same sort of obstacles in the case of the Hamas membership who now face the warrants of arrest. And I think the important question here to ask in relation to the Hamas persons identified by the chief prosecutor is what are these sort of countries, what is the countries doing in the Middle East, especially the Arab countries, to take steps in trying to locate the Hamas members who now face the warrants of arrest. Where are they located? Can they be arrested? And will they be then surrendered to the court? So those are the sort of issues that we have to to follow and to see how that will play out. If the ICC is not getting the cooperation of different countries in this regard, then the chances are slim that those identified on both sides will not be surrendered to the court.
All right, Prof, thank you so much for your time and just for unpacking that for us, for our viewers to better understand with regards to those implications. Thank you for your time. That was Professor Hennie Strydom, an international relations expert.